All right, welcome back. We're resuming our session according to the rules and agenda as outlined and submitted. We have another special guest here. We have Robert Taylor. Robert, if you please join us at the podium there. Robert is our appointed WSBA liaison to the Judicial Information Systems Committee update, which has had a kind of exciting couple of years. And Robert is one of the liaisons who is very diligent and regularly reports to us. You'll be getting a copy of, I think I provided the board a copy of his report. If not, it's already in the materials as well. And I thought, it's nice to get these reports, but it's really nice to see a living human being and really understand what our liaison is doing and what is the JISC, because I have a suspicion that not a lot of us are familiar with the work we've appointed Robert to do and what he's doing. And Robert, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Okay. The JISC is a job I've had for now 4 or 5 years, and we meet 6 times a year, going over an agenda that really covers 4 big areas for the courts. Each of the levels of the judiciary has to manage their case flow. And so you may be aware that Superior Court recently finished a complete changeover from the old SCOMAS system, which was largely not visible to the practitioner. It was an internal system. You could see it through JIS Link if your office subscribed to that. They're now in the process of upgrading the appellate court system. I was quite surprised to learn 4 or 5 years ago the appellate court had no electronic system. It was the longest system that was reliant on paper. And then right now we're in the process of contracting with a vendor to supply a case management system to the courts of lower jurisdiction, so district and municipal courts. So those are the 3 items at the various court levels. And then behind the scenes is a system that unites all of those systems to collect information and give the administrative office of the courts the ability to generate the reports they need that they're statutorily required to produce, collecting things like the number of cases filed and the types, I assume for staffing and funding purposes. And so we've been on an interesting journey for the last 4 or 5 years. Funding during McCleary was not always easy to acquire. Today, with the success of the Superior Court system, I think we've crossed a hurdle in that the AOC, there was some concerns about could they deliver. Could they really do this? And there were courts that had concerns about them. But now they have. It's been launched in all of our counties with the exception of 2. Right now, Pierce County and King County still use their own systems. That will also happen with the courts of limited jurisdiction. There will be courts purchasing their own external systems from a third-party vendor. And one of the things the AOC will get to do is figure out how to knit those systems together so the information that they're required to collect will flow easily from the court to the AOC. Right now, one of the problems that those courts suffer from is that they have to do double entry. So they enter all of the party information and case information and calendar information and docket information and document information into their system, and then they turn around and do it again. We are hopeful that we will reach the day that that sort of replication will end. I think what I'd like to do now, last time at the last JISC meeting, we had a presentation by one of the IT folks, and he sort of described what the system looks like. So I'm going to show it to you now. It might be overwhelming at first, but we'll walk through it. So there it is. It's a simple collection of systems. So the key thing here is the red systems are the old systems that will hopefully go away. The blue system in the middle is that enterprise data repository, sort of the force that binds everything together. And then those blue columns on the right are indications of system or courts that are going with a third-party vendor. And you can see when a third-party vendor is involved, not only does there have to be training at the court level as to how to use that system, but there has to be a bridge built between that system and the AOC. And it would be nice if there were only one third-party vendor out there so the bridge wouldn't have to be rebuilt each time, but there aren't. There are multiples. And so, unfortunately, that keeps the AOC busy. I think one of the things that has caused a lot of conversation, and you would have seen it in my reports over the years, is how to reconcile everybody's needs. Who gets to go first? It was decided that Superior Court would go first, but King County made a big noise 3 years ago, I want to say, because they weren't going to be able to use the system, and their system wasn't functioning properly, and they needed something new. And they were actually instrumental in helping the legislature pony up some more money and moved up the building of the enterprise data repository. So it got a much higher priority, and it is now just about ready to receive all the information that each of these various systems is producing. I'd love to answer questions if you have any, but I want to pose a question to you. I've been at this for 5 years, voting regularly on your behalf, wondering what you might think of the positions that I've taken, and seeing myself speaking for 33,000 members of the bar is sort of a daunting proposition. So usually the issues are not terribly controversial. They usually pass unanimously and things move forward. But every so often I think, what would you guys want to know? What would you want to jump in and decide things on? I think the issue that comes up right now that is of interest is they are negotiating right now with a vendor to supply systems to the courts of limited jurisdiction. It's Tyler Technologies. It's the same people that supplied Odyssey. And when they supplied Odyssey, out of scope was the email connection so that you could file things electronically. And Odyssey said, we'd like to be paid per filing. And ATJ got very excited about that, and ultimately, because it was out of scope, it didn't happen. Email and electronic filing is in scope with this one, and they've done the same thing. We'd like to get paid. And I know that that has been a concern for ATJ, and I no longer have an ATJ representative who attends those meetings on my behalf, so I try to wear their hat, and that would be another group of people that I represent that I have no idea what they're thinking. So it's kind of fun. It's dicey out there. I think the reality is on the costing issue, they're going to work something out. Making e-filing and paying fees is not unusual around the country. A lot of other places around the country don't file as many things as we tend to. In my prior practice, I managed a group of in-house lawyers who had offices around the country, and so I got familiar with the local requirements in a lot of states. And King County, in particular, requires a lot more filings than a lot of other courts. And so if you're charging per filing, you're going to make some money. And so we'll see how they work that out. Other states have worked that out with an annual amount paid to Tyler from the legislature. I think some have worked it out at a court level, and we'll have to see where that goes. Yes.
turn this on. My name is Kim Hunter. I'm a criminal law attorney, so I do a lot, mainly with JABS.
Mm-hmm.
So how does JABS and JIS, are they going to ever link together, or is JIS going to stay and JABS takes over, or what's the deal on that?
What's up there? JABS right now is really a viewer. It is not, it's how you see things. It is not a repository of that information. And I think ultimately it's because it's in yellow, that what does that tell you? It's going to be modernized. The information will always be there. You'll just get to it a different way. And right now, JABS is how the judges use it. And so there's a reluctance to mess with it too much until they're pretty much ready to go with whatever is going to take its place.
Excuse me. Governors, on page 56. So if you're kind of challenged with the screen, this same diagram is on page 56 of your materials.
Thank you. Yes.
So I was an old GIS subscriber and now Odyssey, the portal, and I don't know of course if you're really too involved with the whole Odyssey situation.
Actually, I was the bar's representative to the
for that, okay.
Odyssey work group. So yes.
Oh, then you're very involved.
Yes.
Well, my comments on Odyssey are these. I don't really like the viewing and printing function of it is not very good because you have to print it page by page by page, and you can't, as far as I can tell, save it. You have to print it and then rescan it to save it into your system. I find that difficult. The other thing is, it bothers me a lot that if you do work in several counties, you're going to have to pay a lot of money for every single county that you want to get documents out of. I mean, right now, I have San Juan, which is where my practice is, Whatcom, Snohomish, King. Well, no, King is different right now. But anyway, and since they charge based on the number of people in your firm, even there's 5 in my firm, 2 attorneys and 3 assistants, and yet I'm really the only one that's ever looking at this stuff, and yet I'm paying as if there's 5 people using it. It gets really expensive. So I guess I wish that maybe Odyssey would become a statewide with a single fee per year and that's per year, $250 or $350 per county per year times however many years I'm going to do that is a lot of money.
Boy, you should have been there for the conversations about those. I won't forget you. We had a long conversation about copying, particularly downloading electronic files. It's a revenue source for the clerks. The clerks didn't want to let go of that. We couldn't tell them. We'd figure out another way to get them the money. And so we're stuck with that. Because we're not a unified court system and we have clerks who are elected officials who view themselves as part of the executive branch. They're not part of the judiciary. They've made that very clear on a number of occasions. And you may be aware of the fact that that's currently in litigation over in Benton County. It meant that the system got structured so each county could be separate, and that's why you have an individual sign-on for each county. We knew it was going to happen, but we didn't have a way to solve it given the circumstances we found ourselves in. So I'm sorry, but there isn't a good answer at the moment. I mean, Odyssey is intended to be a statewide system. I don't know how Pierce County justifies paying $300,000+ every year for links when they could have Odyssey for free, but that's their county executive's call. So, yes, sir.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for this and for being here for the bar. With that said, though, I'm really troubled that I've been on this bog since July of 2017, and we, as far as I know, we've never had you come. Before us, you've said for 5 years you've represented us. And that this is the first that I'm seeing you, and then hearing that you're making decisions for 40,000 of us, and we're not involved in those, from what I'm seeing at all. So I'm very familiar with all this from my job and work. One of the things I will say is Odyssey, although better than SCOMUS, it isn't great, in my opinion. Part of the problem, though, is we don't have a unified court system. So my office, we have to have one system for upstairs and one for downstairs. And so there's more money for tax money because with that. And the odd thing to me is the Supreme Court, I believe, has the system on, what is it called?
Accords.
Okay, on base. Is that the name of it?
OnBase is a third-party vendor, usually provides document management systems.
Yes, so they have that. So we have one that has that, and they don't mesh with the other ones. So I think you've made that. I mean, I would like to see us be more involved. Okay, from now on, myself.
Yeah, and I want to just note for the record that Mr. Taylor is one of the we have many liaisons, and he is one of the liaisons that assuredly and regularly always reports and sends reports back to the WSBA, and he gets appointed through the work of the nominations committee. So I just want to let you know how he got there and what he's been doing, and that he has been faithfully reporting back to us. I also, reading the report and making sure it was in the materials and distributing it to you, I wanted to make sure that I thought a lot of people would be interested in it because he does some important work, and we're really glad he's here.
Well, along those lines, because I was kind of curious. I mean, you posed the question, if I think I heard you correctly, do you know this is happening, and what can you do? I'm just curious, and this may not happen today, but it would seem to me as issues come up, hopefully there is a way in which that comes before us so that we can get an answer back to you if time permits, for a number of reasons, including, you're not kind of hanging out there by yourself, and then we're challenged or whatever about, well, how'd you come to that decision and under what authority or all that, instead of, from here on out, how can we better coordinate either with the entire Board of Governors, you're asking the question as something is pending, or at least with the officers or the executive committee in between those times, again, so that you can get some feedback and some response so that you know where we're coming from. And, if any of those things, those things are things that I don't know what the past is, but the past is prologue. The question then is, kind of where do we go from here? And so I thank you for coming in front of us, and hopefully we'll see you more often.
I can share that 3 or 4 years ago when Ken Masters was on the Board of Governors, he and 3 other governors expressed an interest in getting the meeting reports and being a sounding board for me. But they, of course, their terms ended, and it kind of... It didn't continue. So I'm happy to work that way with any number of people who would like to.
Governor Knight.
Thank you. I practice a lot in Pierce County, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about Lynx, which you mentioned. I feel like Lynx is by far the most intuitive, user-friendly system of all the state systems. And a couple of things that I think, and you ask, how can Pierce County justify $300,000 per year for Lynx? I think it gets paid for more than $300,000 by the license fees. I think it's $200 per user or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's at least revenue neutral, and I'm happy to pay the $200 per year for the system. And some of the components of Lynx that would be good to incorporate into the statewide system, I know they're there, but just in a more user-intuitive, friendly way. ability to easily search by party name and directly access the case itself, not just the cause number, but get straight into the case. Unlimited viewing of any file, unlimited printing of it. Ability to easily, by your bar number, get to every case where you have an appearance and just go directly there. And then view all those cases. And I just feel like Lynx has done an excellent job of being intuitive and easy to access and economical. And it would be nice if there was a whole statewide system. But in looking at some of the things to include, I would look to Lynx as a model of some of the good things that it can be.
Thank you. I think the thing that the takeaway for me is there is a difference between the bulk of the user community for these systems, which are largely the courts, and then the public use of it through the Odyssey portal. And I know that the portal got low priority because the people in the room were largely judges, clerks, and administrative officers. It's not to say it couldn't happen, but in terms of priority, that's where it is now. Odyssey is run through its contract cycles, so they have no more money for upgrades. But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. So if we want to suggest ideas about upgrading, Tyler does a biannual upgrade of the system because their system is sold in 15 or 20 states in the country, and they're always updating, and so every couple of years you get a slew of new features. And so the question is, will those new features that are built in and will be part of our subscription satisfy us, or do we need something special? And of course, when I say special, that means money. So it's good to keep in mind. I'd love to get a list from you of those things. Yeah.
We have Governor Tollefson, past President Pickett, Governor Stevens. We have some Governor Higginson, and we have some members who want to comment. I'm very excited that this guest was brought.
Who thought after lunch, an IT conversation would be
Governor
exciting?
Tollefson.
Hi, I'm Brian Tollefson from Pierce County, and obviously I know a lot about the Lynx system in Pierce County because I used it I was there at the beginning of it. So I know one thing is that it ties together a lot of county government agencies. It's not just the courts and the clerk's office. So the jail's in there, the sheriff's office is in there, Department of Assigned Counsel is in there, the prosecutor's office is in there, and so a lot of that stuff I don't think they can take that statewide, but that's part.
That's
part
the
of
top
thing.
line up there that you'll see. DOL, DOC, and the WSBA feed is also in there because we feed information to AOC weekly with licensing information.
Yeah, so that's why I don't know if Pierce County's system could be replicated statewide because of its uniqueness.
Pierce has to go back in through SCOMAS to get that information.
Which brings me to my next question. SCOMAS is the big problem from what I understand because it's such an ancient system. It's character-based. It's based on a programming language that nobody knows anymore.
DOS.
Well, it's COBOL for starters. And and the data is really, really intertwined with the programming. Have they figured out a way to extricate the data so they can transfer the data to a new system, or are they still trying to figure out that piece of magic?
So 2 steps were involved. Once Odyssey launched, they divided the world into, Odyssey forward and prior to Odyssey. SCOMAS continued to collect information on both sides of that line, but they've been transferring it over into Odyssey over time because the clerk's offices were trying to manage a new system and doing 16 different things at once. And going back and replicating old data into the system got a lower priority, so it wasn't happening at the outset. Ideally, it'll all be captured in the enterprise data warehouse eventually. So
it's old stuff.
It's a work in progress.
Okay.
So it will happen, but Yeah, what you're seeing, that diagram is probably not even as complicated as it is in terms of the linkage between the various systems. I mean, their goal is to be pretty dang transparent at the end of the day and make it easy for you to find what you're looking for. We're just a ways away, and I think what hampers it a little bit is the third-party systems that get hooked on. So Seattle Muni wants their own system. King County District wants their own system. We just approved Kitsap, Thurston, and Spokane courts to have their own system, in part because they purchased the system or they purchased some component of it earlier, and they want to continue with what they know rather than jump into the new thing. And at the courts of limited jurisdiction level, there isn't a statewide system yet because it hasn't happened yet. So they have to get their work done. So they have to have a system to do it, and that's kind of why we are where we are with multiple systems.
So I have just one more question.
Did I answer your other one?
Well, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Based on what you know, how many millions of dollars has the state spent trying to get Odyssey up and running, and how many millions of dollars was spent before they decided to hire Odyssey to do this? Do you have any idea? I do, but I just wonder if you do.
The Odyssey contract was over multiple years, and I want to say it was $14 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. And the CLJ contract is for a little bit less, but we're 5 years ahead, so there's some advantages in terms of the passage of time. Both of them, well, the Odyssey one came in on budget, and so they delivered the product that the work group said it wanted. There were a lot of pieces that weren't part of it, and we knew that going in. So we knew it wasn't going to be all things to all people at that point. Right. I think the CLJ system will be a lot more inclusive and have a lot more features just up front.
Thanks very much for being here.
Sure.
Past President Pickett. What did I write here? Governor Stevens.
So I just wanted to understand if I'm drawing the right conclusions based on the chart. And if you can help me with, where things are going. So the first conclusion I have based on the chart is nothing is fully modernized. Now that's not a pejorative. There are no green boxes or squares. Okay, but that then at least comes to the next question, because we have a number of blue boxes or spheres that show modernization in progress. And I'm kind of curious if you know when might some of these boxes or squares be fully modernized. And I guess the corollary question is that not going to happen until you're actually able to tie everything in? I'm just trying to understand the implications and the conclusions I draw looking at this diagram. And then you have the need, and I think you've spoken to the need to modernize, et cetera, et cetera. But I was just curious about what the implications were, and where are we going with this?
Okay, let me see if I can respond. I think the easier thing to say is the red ones are going away.
Okay.
This was done by an IT manager, so I don't think they're set up from a DNA perspective to do a green box. Everything is capable of being modernized.
Okay.
He was apologetic that there was nothing in green.
Okay.
I think, some of them are further along than others. Some of the smaller ones, I mean, the State Patrol data exchanges and the Department of Licensing and the Departments of Corrections changes are a smaller set of information. I mean, obviously the DOC doesn't require anything on the civil side. So those will happen more quickly. The harder things, the things that are going to take longer, are the things that are universal and connect all the systems. So the viewer, that is JABS, I think is going to be on a much longer time frame before it is the see-all for everybody. The unknown to me is what additional work would they do on the public portal so that people who aren't going in through JIS, and remember, a lot of our indigent folks, this is how they get to their information. They have limited access to what they can see. So when will they all be done? They're all mapped out. They all have timetables, and so it's an unknown for me to tell you any one system when it's going to be there. But anything that's been identified on here has got a timetable, and the other moving part of this, of course, is with the legislature funding biennially and projects completing and engineers moving off, and they can't be in limbo, they lose people. And then CLJ ramps back up, so now they're out, they're in this trough. Now they're trying to find good people, and they lost Kumar to the Department of Transportation. So staffing becomes an issue in terms of when they can actually deliver these projects. And the thing that was the issue for the last couple of meetings was a change to Rule 13, which is how an individual court gets permission to buy their own system. There was a lot of conversation about advanced notice, so AOC could build the bridge. There were a number of courts that were frustrated because AOC can't promise when it will deliver, particularly when they aren't funded to have the staff to do it. And so they wanted penalties if AOC couldn't deliver on time, and AOC was reluctant to commit because they can't. And so it's a delicate dance they're going through in order to figure out what can we work on, what do we have the people to do. We have to have people that can respond to problems with Odyssey. So they've got a maintenance group there, and they'll build the same thing for the CLJ and for Accords, for the appellate courts. I'm not sure that gives you a precise answer on anyone's system, but anything that we've identified in mind has got a target date, and if it doesn't have resources devoted to it, it will. And you might ask, where does this money come from? Well, when you pay your traffic tickets, a portion of that goes to fund court systems. And I think the latest number that I've been told was that account during the last, 10 or 12 years, maybe longer, has accumulated over time $22 million, which would have easily paid for a lot of these systems. And each and every time that has happened in the economic downturn, the legislature has come in and swept the account. So none of the $22 million has been spent on our systems.
Very interesting. We're running a little bit behind in my internal mental clock, so I'm going to move to member comments at this time. And first we have Laura Bradley.
Is this on? Okay. Good afternoon, Laura Bradley. I'm your liaison from the Access to Justice Board. I also happen to be the Access to Justice Board's liaison to the Courts of Limited Jurisdiction Court User Work Group. So the first comment I want to make is that work group is ramping up, and they are looking for a WSBA member to be your liaison so that they can come back and let you know what's happening and get your input. So I would just encourage the nominations committee to get working on that so you can get this information that many of you have expressed today you want, and you want to know what's going on. Secondly, just to give you, since you don't currently have a liaison, AOC had initially decided that they were going to go with journal technologies for the courts of limited jurisdiction, and as they entered negotiations, determined that journal wasn't able to do what the courts wanted, and so they terminated negotiations. They were going to go with a best of breed kind of model, which is picking modules from different companies and putting them together. And while they were working on that, Tyler approached AOC and said, we know you're not negotiating anymore. What can we do to prove to you that we're the right vendor? And so the good news is, I think right now the courts of limited jurisdiction are looking at an upgraded version of Odyssey, which is much better. One of the improvements is that they have a public portal that is one web page for all courts. And so that's going to be a vast improvement for those of you who practice in multiple jurisdictions. There are other improvements that are going on in the courts of limited jurisdiction. So I just wanted to let you know that work's going on. Sounds like you're all interested in it, so make sure you get a liaison there that can report back to you and tell you what's happening.
Thank you. Ms. Hawkins?
I'm in favor of paper files, and any presentation that has so many acronyms and words is way over my head. But as the liaison with the family law section, that's my issue. Is the public going to have access to the sensitive personal information in family law files is always a concern of ours. And so is that something that ever gets discussed in your work with all these different programs?
Yes, but no blood has been spilled so far. If the document you're thinking of was confidential in the paper world, it's confidential in the electronic world. The clerks have been very clear about protecting confidentiality.
Well, I'm thinking beyond that to the declarations people file where they say bad things about the other party. So they're in a public paper or a public file, not paper anymore, but public file at the courthouse. It's available if you go down to the courthouse, but not available if you go on the internet. Is there any movement towards that? Or if there is that something that you can come back before supporting?
I think the approach has been that if it is public, regardless of the media that it occupies, it is public. So if a party wants a document to be protected, it would have to seek an order to seal it. So the electronic system will mimic the paper system in terms of confidentiality.
So right now, King County documents are public in that you can get them if you go down to the courthouse, but you can't access them through the internet. Are these new systems that are going in place allowing for internet access of family law files?
Yes.
And so what can we do anything to limit that?
I think they're following what they think is the law at the moment, which is if it's public, it's public. It doesn't matter what document or media it's stored in.
So what would need to change for that to change? We need a...
There's a group called the Data Dissemination Committee. That's the group to talk to.
DDC.
Data Dissemination.
I'll write that down.
Thank you. It looks like that's all the member comments. I have one follow-up question as we close this out. It sounds like from you, you're a little bit uncomfortable with all the power given to you, and you might like a little more input and guidance and feedback back from the Board of Governors. Is that fair to say?
I'm comfortable.
Oh, you're comfortable. Great.
But I would like guidance and feedback.
So I don't know. It might be a good idea for the Board of Governors to think about authorizing me to make a little ad hoc committed interface with him. But are there any other final government comments or action on this matter? Governor Higginson?
I just had one final observation and wonder if you have any thoughts or know anything about what I'm about to say, which is I don't find Odyssey as helpful as it can be because when the documents are scanned into the system and they're listed and I've paid my fee so I can, make copies of them, they're not titled the same as the actual document. So if it's say it's declaration in support of motion for adequate cause, it's just called affidavit, or something very cryptic, and you can't figure out from looking at the list of documents what it actually is. It's really problematic when you're trying to do designation of clerk's papers for appeals. But it's even difficult if you're just trying to find something that you're not sure you have a copy of in your file and you want to, make sure you've got it. Has there been any discussion about having the clerks title them as the documents as they're actually called, or is that just an individual court by court or clerk by clerk determination?
That's a great question. Initially, the conversation was, the clerks will determine what they write down when they receive a document and it gets filed. There is a clerks association, and they do talk, and I don't think they're against some sort of standardized format, but I don't think they've achieved that yet. And so there is a place to go to raise that and see what they're willing to do. They recognize that it creates the exact issue you've identified is when you're trying to create a record for appeal. I just don't think we're there yet. But
thank you.
Let me know, and I can put you in touch or put this issue to the Clerks Association and see what they'll say.
I would love it personally because it's really hard to find documents. It's just so difficult, and you have to spend a lot of extra time hunting until you find the right affidavit, which is really a declaration anyway. And before Odyssey, it was pretty easy. The clerk called it what it was. You could find it super easy. So.
There's not a field limitation within Odyssey, so there's no reason that they can't do it a different way.
That's good to know. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. I think this was incredibly educational and useful for the Board of Governors. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And if any governor would be interested in working a little more closely with Mr. Taylor, please shoot me an email, and we can talk about that a little more. Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor.